In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. Thank you all for accepting our invitation. Brothers and sisters, members of the press, distinguished dignitaries, guests, the national representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we give him praise and thanks for his prophets and his messengers and the scriptures which they brought. We thank him for Moses and the Israelite prophets who gave us the Torah, or the Old Testament. We thank him for Jesus, who gave us the Injil, and the apostles who gave us the Gospels. We thank him for Muhammad ibn Abdullah, through whom the final revelation to the human family before the judgment of this world came. The Holy Quran. I am a student of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I could never thank Allah enough for his merciful intervention in the affairs of the black man and woman of America by his coming in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, the great Mahdi. And we thank him for raising up in our midst as his messenger, Messiah, to us, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I greet all of you, members of the press, members of Congress, members of the activist community. I greet you all with the greeting words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language. Assalamu alaikum. I want to first thank the members of the press for honoring us with your presence, and all of you who have come to hear what we have to say. For 40 years, I have labored in this vineyard in the absence of my teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. His work among us for 40 years is unparalleled in the work of reform of the black man and woman, bringing us from the savage state of existence that we were placed in by our former slave masters and their children. He was greatly opposed, but he was successful in making a new people out of us. He proved the efficacy of his wisdom. He proved that the wisdom that he was taught by his teacher is sufficient to make of the black man and woman, not only here, but in the Caribbean, in Africa, and the isles of the Pacific, a brand new restored people after 6,000 years of living under the tyranny of white supremacy. This is not a hate-filled message from some radical madman. This is a message of divine love. But in that divine love of the divine creator, there's warning and there's guidance. God never sends prophets except that there's something awry, something wrong. And the prophet doesn't come out of hatred from God for the wrong of the people. He comes out of the mercy of God to call an errant people back to a path that would grant them divine favor and escape the chastisement of God. America is a great nation, but America needs to reflect on her sins. Who is bold enough, who is strong enough to say to America, you have been wrong for a long, long time? And it is time now for you to actually see yourself as God sees you, not like the silly woman that looked in the mirror and said, mirror, mirror on the wall, am I not the fairest of them all? No, you are not. So I am here from my teacher. Not out of hate, but out of hope that maybe what I say to this 45th president of the United States of America might have an effect to get him off of the course that he is on. Yes, sir. That's right. Yes, sir. 40 years ago, I was awakened from a deep sleep after the so-called death of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. His work destroyed. His name buried. His people back to the old habits that we had once forsaken. And after about 30 months, I decided I must make an effort to rebuild his work. Yes, sir. So in September of 1977, I decided to rebuild the work of Elijah Muhammad and reprove to you who had rejected him and to a government that persecuted him that he had the best solution for the ever-growing toxic relationship between black and white. So this message is not from Louis Farrakhan.
That's right. That's right.
This message is from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad through Louis Farrakhan. And it is a final warning to the government and people of the United States of America. It is a final call to black people that you must change the way you think and the way you act, because the time has arrived for you to do better and be better, or suffer the chastisement of God until you submit your will. It's written in the Bible, and I say this to our president. It is written that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus the Christ is Lord. I represent that Jesus, that Christ that you have been longing for and looking for. To my Christian family, you got the right name. You got the right man in Jesus, but you don't have the right identification. We have to escape the tyranny of white supremacy that is embodied in an image of Jesus that is not Jesus. If Jesus were in fact a white man, we would have no problem bowing to his greatness and majesty, righteousness, because that's the way he's styled in the Bible as well as in the Quran. But the travesty is he was not a white man. You say, what difference does it make? It must have made a difference to you to take him out of his color. So that we would be worshiping your flesh as a Caucasian. Never summoning the courage to check you in your wrong. Stand up against you in your evil. And force you to do better as a people toward us. So today, God has come. And he has raised up a Jesus. The Jesus that Jesus the prophet was a sign of. Jesus the prophet who lived 2,000 years ago was a righteous servant of God. He is dead like all the prophets that lived before him. But Jesus prefigured one that would come in the last days of this world, who would be Jesus, the Messiah, Son of Mary. I know that you have these images and you believe you're truly following Jesus. Jesus was not an unrighteous man. How could you be a follower of his doing the evil that you do to people that you made Christians? We didn't come here as Christians. We became Christians under your tutelage. You were careful not to let us read the full book, the full gospel. You wanted religion to make us a better tool of service. Jesus never knew anything about a cross. The symbol of the early Christians was a fish. So when Jesus met Peter, Peter was fishing. And Jesus said unto him, "Come and follow me, and I will make you a fisher of men." Taking people out of a murky sea of filth and evil and indecency and transforming their lives in their discipleship of him. To the members of the Jewish community, Louis Farrakhan is not your enemy. You act as though it is sin to critique you. How can you be better than what you are to escape the judgment of God if someone does not stand up with strength and criticize your misbehavior in the name of God? That's a great act of love. Every Jewish mother is honored and loved because a Jewish mother chastens her children with love and guides them to the greatness that they have manifested on this earth. So when you sing the song, "My Yiddish Mama," you know how to honor your mother, fulfilling the command of God. Honor your mother and father that your days may be long. Well, as a member of the press, you may say, hey, I didn't come here to hear no preaching, Farrakhan. Well, this is just what I would call the prologue. Mr. Trump is an anomaly. He's someone that doesn't fit the norm. You expected a man to be like the other presidents. You wanted him to be more presidential. He's so transparent. You wanted him to put on a suit and act dignified, like the thieves and robbers that dress in suits and tell lies. You wanted him to be like that. He's telling lies, all right. And you're angry because he's your reflection. He's an anomaly. You can't make him what you desire him to be so that you can say, oh, that's my president. He wasn't made that way. God has him here. What did you say, Farrakhan? Do you think that God is not interested in who is president of the United States of America? Especially when it's out of the time of evil? It's in our time now. You Muslims who are present, in the Quran, God and Satan are having a talk, and God is saying to Satan, I've judged you to be erring. Satan knows he's wrong. Any devil knows they're wrong. So God said to Satan, as Satan asked him, respite me, delay my doom. Because Satan was doomed from the day he was made. And God said to him, surely you are of the respited ones. And Satan responded to God by saying, I'm going to come after them in your straight path. I'm going to come to them from their right, from their left, from before them and behind them. I'm going to make them all to deviate. Did you notice that President Trump got in an argument with the Pope?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What kind of man is he? That he would argue with a man that every president of the United States would go to Rome and kiss the ring. But not Donald Trump. Have you considered these things? The Pope said, well, he's wrong because he's building walls instead of bridges. That's a nice thing for you to say, Pope Francis, because there's a wall that you all have built that walls you off from the poor and the destitute. How could you say he's wrong for building a wall when Nicholas V, a predecessor, signed a papal bull giving the kings of Portugal and Spain the right to come into the Western Hemisphere and take the resources of the indigenous people, and if they would not convert, kill them.
Yes, sir.
Then wall them off in a reservation. Wall us off under segregation. Wall our people off in South Africa under apartheid. You've been building walls, not bridges. So President Trump called that a form of hypocrisy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You have no right to condemn him, he said, for building a wall or telling him he's not a Christian. Suppose I told you that you are not Christian. How could you be? 2,000 cases of pedophilia before the Vatican? How could you be? But we don't have the right to say to you, sit down. But Christ has that authority. No masquerading in his name. The masquerade is over. So when I decided to rebuild the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I went around in Chicago and asked for the blessings of black leaders and opinion makers and pastors. I got the blessings of John Johnson of Ebony and Jet. I got the blessing of Father George Clemens and Father Flager. I got the blessing of Lou and Georgia Palmer. I got the blessing of black people who meant something to black people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But when it was heard this month, 40 years ago, on Cottage Grove Avenue at the Institute of Positive Education under the guidance of Hakeem Madhubuti, that I was going to rebuild his work, some of my brothers who once followed Elijah Muhammad were talking about taking my life. So one of my friends, Ronaldo Glover, who is a lawyer and was the husband of Sonji, formerly known as Sonji Clay, the first wife of Muhammad Ali. I met in their home with Al Reynolds and Glover, and they were trying to help me get started. But Glover was a partner in a law firm downtown called Isham, Lincoln, and Beale under the former governor of the state of Illinois, Governor Ogilvie.
Yes, sir.
So they brought me to Governor Ogilvie, who, I think it was Nixon, wanted to make him head of the FBI. He turned it down. And Glover said to Governor Ogilvie, Farrakhan is trying to rebuild the work of his teacher, and there's talk about assassinating him. What would you advise him to do? Governor Ogilvie looked at me and said, Farrakhan, I would stay in the public. Keep on speaking and getting people around you. That would make it more difficult for you to be assassinated. I thanked the governor and went home to my humble abode, my poor wife and family, and nervous about what their husband and father was trying to do. And I sat down in a chair. I had a refrigerator at that time that had a push button door. You push the button and the door would open. and the refrigerator looked brand new because there was nothing in it. It's true. And so I started thinking on my teacher. And this is who I want to represent to President Trump today, because my teacher, a messenger of God and Messiah, was so wise that he could teach me in a crowd. And nobody would know what he's saying, but he's saying it to me, and I wouldn't know what he was saying. But the seed was planted. Let me give you an example. I was sitting with him one day, and he's carrying on a conversation with his laborers. And then he looks at me and said, "Brother, when a seed germinates in the earth, it sends a root down long before it sends a shoot up." And he went right on talking. So after I left Governor Ogilvy, I went home, and in the quiet of a room, his words came back to me. Go underground and work without being seen. And for 7 long years, I went underground. And I didn't surface until Reverend Jackson wanted to run to be president and asked me to come by his side. He said, "Farrakhan, you can't deny the people what you know. Speak." And I have to tell you, it was Reverend Jackson that brought me out of hibernation. And my first interview was with a young lady named Jamie Gangel. I think she was an NBC reporter. She asked me questions, I gave her straight answers. And then Jesse got in trouble. You know the history. I'm just touching it, because it leads to what I'm going to say in detail to President Trump. I never knew anything about relationships with the Jewish community. Nothing. They hired me to sing or dance or play. I did that. I went to their homes and I ate chopped liver. And I admire Jewish people to this day.
Yes, sir.
Because without the Jewish people, civilization would not have advanced to where it is. Nobody can take that away from them. But there are righteous Jews, good Jews, Jews that want to practice the teachings of the prophets. But then there are others who don't wish to practice. And it is they that hated Reverend Jackson's desire to be president. He had shook hands with Arafat, sin. I don't understand you people, that the president can go and meet with his enemies. But if we meet with one of your enemies, who's not our enemy, all of a sudden we are anti-Semitic. Every black man of consequence was called an anti-Semite. Why do you use that? When these people don't hate Jews, but they may criticize some aspect of your behavior that disadvantages them. And if they do, you punish them. I thank the owners of the Watergate for allowing us to be here. We had a display of a book that our scholars had researched called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. And of course, they were a little upset.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And they didn't want it up there, but I do.
Come on. Yes, sir.
I'm not being defiant. But we paid for this room. And it was a lot of money. We paid for the hotel rooms. So if we want to display this, I sent for the owners. Come down, sit, and listen. Because this book is not anti-Semitic. It is truth of what has been done to us by your people. I'm not putting it up to insult you. But you need to study your own history if you don't know it. But those of you who fight us with this, it's because you know your history and you know what you've done to us, but you don't want us to know, and you don't want us to share that knowledge with our own black brothers and sisters. So I started defending Reverend Jackson. I was not anti-Semitic. I just was pro-Jesse. I saw Jesse as a kind of hope for us because he had that charisma. He was so handsome and so brilliant, and he wanted to galvanize us to vote for him. And he asked me to help him. I said, sure.
Yes, sir.
After I discussed it with the board, we raised $25,000 for Reverend Jackson. The FOI started protecting him and his family. I didn't know what the story was, but when I heard from Jesse that Milton Coleman, he was talking to him. And you know, black folk use a lot of slang. Well, you white people, you know, you have names for us. Oh, yeah. When you're with your fellow thieves and robbers, you know. You call us niggers and jigaboos and coons and monkeys. Yeah, you've had a field day. So Jesse, being from the hood, he called New York Town. I don't want to rehearse something that got him in trouble. I've been in trouble for 30 years now. But my point is, that's a slang term to say that the Jewish people have great control and power in New York City. That's all. So we used to say, if we come into the ghetto, we're going up to Spookville. Because we've always been the spook that sat by the door, and you don't pay attention to spooks. Because they're replicas of what once existed. On the night of February 25th, the night before our Savior's Day convention, we are all backing Reverend Jackson, and the Prime Minister of Jamaica comes up, and he's on the rostrum, and oh man, people are just backing Jesse and the MGT, and came out on the stage. You know that Rolaids commercial? How do you spell relief? R-O-L-A-I-D-S. Well, we said, how do you spell relief? J-A-C-K-S-O-N. We were pushing Jesse. Why do you get angry with us? He was our self-interest. We had an interest in his moving the Democratic Party in a way that we could get some benefit out of that party. So I defended him that night, and I said, if you harm Jesse, he'll be the last black man that you harm. I said, we are tired of feeding our leaders to white people like raw meat to lions. Well, the next day, I was called a black Hitler. A black Hitler. Now I'm going on 85. I never have been arrested. I haven't beaten up nobody, shot nobody. What have I done that I'm persona non grata except speak the truth and refuse to bow down? So the controversy then focused on me. Reverend Jackson excused me from his campaign. And then I got a call from Mr. Fogarty of the National Press Club. Right. White people, when they hear that you are bold or something, they want to bring you out. You might think they really are interested in you, but they want to tap you out to see, is this the real thing? Or like Mr. Trump would say, can we make a deal? So before the National Press Club, I spoke in July of 1984. And in your little press kit, I put what I said at the press club there in 84 for you to review it. Because many of you don't know me. You know me from what they say about me, but you don't come close enough to me to find out who I really am, because you are afraid that my presence And your presence with me will hurt you in your desire to rise in the white man's world. Did you know that Ronald Reagan said any problem that America has, the solution can be found in between the two covers of the Bible? He said that. So at the press club, I presented a solution to the black-white problem from Scripture. Bible and Quran. And many of you that call yourself Christian and Muslim, you read the Quran and the Bible as long as it don't condemn your foolishness. So I wanted you to see what I said in 84, which was 33 years ago. The very next year, I made a speech in California at the Forum. Over 19,000 people showed up. And members of the Jewish community were marching, saying, who do you want? Farrakhan. How do you want him? Dead. After I spoke, it was a hot lecture. I mean, fire, you know. And my teacher told me that when you light a fire, don't stay around and watch it burn. So I'll be out of here after today. You may say, well, this is not a usual press conference. No, it isn't. No, this is far from that. I warned President Reagan at that time of the thinking that he had, not fully knowing it. But I knew enough to know that Ronald Reagan didn't have no love for black people. The next year, 85, after the Forum, I go down in Mexico. And on the night of the 17th of September, in a vision, I was carried up on the top of a mountain there in a sacred valley in Tepoztlan. There's a temple at the top made like a pyramid, but it's a monument to the Christ figure of Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl. And there I was at night in a vision-like experience. And one of these UFOs came over. I had people with me in the vision. When we got to the top of that mountain, this wheel-like plane came over. 3 legs came down from it. I thought it's going to land on the mountain. I said to Jabril, come on with me. And a voice said, not them, just you. So I walked forward. And as you've heard me say it many times, and I am not drunk nor crazy or a liar. See, when you have an experience, you say it the same way every time. And a beam of light came out of that wheel and drew me up into it. And I knew it was taking me to the mother wheel. I won't go into a lot of detail now because the detail is in your packet. You can go and Check it out. Because what I'm saying to you, I want you intelligent ones or not so intelligent to do the research.
Yes, sir.
And you'll find that every word that I'm saying to you, absolutely right. When I got inside the big wheel, there was a scroll with cursive writing on it. I'm trying to read it. Elijah Muhammad speaks. And the scroll rolls up. You got his words? Put them up. Listen to what he said to me. He said, President Reagan, in early September, met with his Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a war. I want you to hold a press conference in Washington, D.C., and make known their plans. And tell them that you got it from me, Elijah Muhammad, on the wheel. Listen, just listen. Then he said, you got one more thing to do. And when you have done it, you may come again to the wheel. And I will let you see me face to face. And he dismissed me. What he said to me, these words that you saw, he told me before he departed from us. He said, brother, the first scientist speaks in formulae. The second scientist has to break down the formula into paragraphs and give you the message. The first scientist is God himself. He don't use a lot of words. He speaks in formula, which is a mathematical expression of symbols that you have to study and deepen your understanding, and then from the formula you can express what is hidden behind the symbols. It has taken me 32 years to finally understand all that was contained in those few words. And I'm going to run it for you right now, very quickly, and get to President Trump. To me, Elijah Muhammad is the first scientist. For me. Like it was when God made Moses a god over Pharaoh and made Aaron his prophet or messenger to the people. I've been among you a long time. And I have not failed you in warning you of what the government of the United States of America has been planning against black people generally, but black youth in particular, and the Nation of Islam. Now, you may not have been listening, but you're going to listen today, because we're at the end of this now. I had to think about this. Reagan met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, okay, in early September. Wow. But I don't know who the war is against. He didn't say. That was for me to study. But the formula was so deep. I went on a tour, world tour, and while I was in Africa, boy, America, you have been something, because you knew when you heard me in '84 that Elijah was back. And he was back in that young man that was talking. He's back today. And now in the fullness of these 32 years, I'm going to run real quick over 6 presidents that have met with their joint chiefs of staff to plan a war in the Islamic world and to plan a war against black people and particularly black youth. And we're at the end of it now. The plan is to genocide and kill you all. Listen to me good now. I'm going to drop it in the president's lap because he's the last one.
Yes, sir.
Reagan ain't never loved us. When Reagan was the governor in California, he and Edwin Meese, who later became his attorney general, they were planning war games in California. And the war games were not against some foreign enemy. The war games were against black people. And this has continued from 6 presidents. And the slickest of them all, Tricky Dick was before, but Slick Willie, you caught more hell under the Clinton administration, and you thought he was our first black president. But I want to run the presidents down so you could see that the government of America has been planning our demise. Any members of Congress here, any members of the civil rights movement that are here, you love this nation. You've suffered every indignity to make America better, that she might be great. And every time you forced her to make a law that was in our favor, they came right behind that law with skill and chicanery to make the law of non-effect. This started in 1876 in the Hayes-Tilden presidential election. It was so close they didn't know who it was, who the winner was. So they met here in Washington at the Wormley Hotel. It's not here now. In 1877. But the election was in 1876. Thank you. I know what I'm saying, brother. I need help, though. But when I need it, I'll call you. In the Wormley Hotel, the white members of Congress made a deal that Rutherford B. Hayes would be president. But Tilden, being in Congress, the deal was that when we were so-called emancipated, Abraham Lincoln sent federal troops into the South to make sure that black people were treated better.
Yes, sir.
But the deal was, if you let Rutherford B. Hayes be president, we'll take all the federal troops out of the South, and then you all can go back to doing what you do. That was called the great betrayal of the so-called American Negro in 1877. Now, to the Jewish people in this hall, you weren't there, but there was a Jewish man named Levi who was in Congress, and he sold the agreement that was made in the hotel to the members of Congress, and it became policy.
Yes, sir.
And Reconstruction then was over. In 12 years, black people had built over 60 towns because we were the artisans, we were the craftsmen, we were the builders. In 12 years, we were in Congress. We had high positions. But after that agreement came the Ku Klux Klan, the Night Riders, slave codes, black codes, and members of the Jewish community who owned a lot of the plantations. Please don't get angry and upset, because this is real history. You put us back on the plantation as sharecroppers. You began riding down on us, and if any of us escaped the plantation, many of the Irish that were coming over were they call them the paddy wagon. They would come after us and bring us back to the plantation. Those were hard days. Hard days. Guess what? When the Emancipation Proclamation so-called set us free, we were the builders, we were the architects, we were the brick masons, we were the carpenters, we were the plumbers, we were all of that. If you saw a white man with a hammer in his hand, he was going to beat some black man, but he wasn't building nothing. Then, in this book, which we researched from Jewish scholars, historians, rabbis, over 2,000 footnotes. And when they told me, Farrakhan, that book is a great calumny against the Jewish people, they said, we want you to denounce that book. Because it's false. I said to Irv Kutzinet, Rabbi Shalman, and a few rabbis I met in their home. They said, Farrakhan, you must denounce the book. I said, fine. If it's false, I don't want to have nothing to do with it. I said, but everyone that we quoted is a Jewish scholar, a Jewish rabbi, or a Jewish historian. So I'll denounce it, but you have to denounce everyone that we quoted as liars. Now look, all is fair. in love. They told me, if you want our friendship, we have to watch you over a protracted period of time. Yeah, imagine. And I was supposed to be like a little Negro because I'm in their house and say, yes, sir. When we got finished with them that day, the war was on. Because I told them, I don't mind being your friend. That's why I'm here. But if being your friend means I got to deny the truth, then yours is a friendship I don't need, and yours is a friendship I don't want. So you all know that when you got a black man that's not going to bow to you, then that's trouble, because you've been waiting for the Messiah. And you know that he comes to end your civilization. So when you hear a black man talking like Farrakhan is talking, you hear the end coming. And if you can stop him, if you can shut his mouth, if you can kill him, Ronald Reagan wanted to kill Gaddafi. When I found out the war was against Gaddafi, I was in Benin and in Ghana and in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso.
Yes, sir.
And I sent all my family back, and I flew to Libya. And all of Gaddafi government was in my hotel, and I told them my vision. They ran out of that room like raid had been there. And the next thing I knew, Brother Gaddafi said he wanted me to speak and introduce him the next day, and 80 nations of the non-aligned movement were in Libya. And I stood in Tripoli and repeated that experience on the wheel and told Gaddafi what they were going to do. They were going to bomb the airport, destroy the water project. He listened. He got his airplanes out into the Sudan. The next thing I knew, an American plane was shot down, and one of those fine aircraft carriers that Mr. Trump brought over to Asia was in the Gulf of Sirte. But something happened to him. By the time I got to Saudi Arabia, it came out in the Arab news that there was a bright object over the Mediterranean. Just listen to me. I'll die on what I'm telling you. And I said to those with me, I said the wheel was there. The electronic equipment on the aircraft carrier was messed up. So it had to go back to Florida. In the meantime, I was able to get out of Libya. I got into Saudi Arabia, and a few days later, the bombs dropped on Libya. It was the greatest assassination attempt, most expensive in history. So they always wanted Gaddafi. But what I did not know was the war at that time was on two fronts. It was war with a Muslim country in Africa, but war on the nation of Islam and Islam, period, in America. Reagan was doing war games in California. When he became president, he brought all that stuff with him into the White House. Meese came. And the war games were practiced even more so because they expected since 67 and 68, when the riots broke out and Dr. King was assassinated, the government of America knew that the black youth were dangerous. Black folk were becoming more militant. And instead of seeing that there has to be a solution, let's separate the two people. But he didn't want to do that. Killed them. Reagan out. Well, I start with Nixon because that fellow was so bad. Did you know that Nixon the whole thing about Nixon was the left, West, the anti-war group, and all blacks, not some. So the plot was against black people in general. Notice how many black people we sent to Congress or made mayors or police chiefs, and all of a sudden they accepted a box of candy, or they went to a basketball game or baseball game, and the next thing you know, they're before court and going to jail on some foolishness that white people do all the time. They made Mayor Marion Barry look horrible. They had brother on TV smoking the pipe. Did they? They made Mayor Barry look so bad that black people who were in the spirit to vote for black people, after seeing Mayor Barry like that, they said, what are we doing, man? So I was somewhere in Atlanta, and they came, the press. Mr. Farrakhan, you seem to be an upstanding man. What do you think about a man who is highly respected and he's using drugs and having illicit sex? I said, who are you talking about? JFK? That black woman froze. She wanted me as a black man to condemn another black man, but the White House, all you members of the press, you knew what kind of man John was. You knew what Bobby was. You knew they were sneaking Marilyn Monroe into the White House. But you never said a damn thing. Now all of a sudden everybody's groping. In the Holy Quran, Allah says of the Prophet, did not I find you an orphan? Did not I find you groping and showed you the way? Groping only means you're trying to find your way because you can't see, so you feel. Now, if you go to Congress and ask, will all the gropers please stand up? Practically the whole damn Congress will say, damn, I've been found out now. Just hypocrites. Oh, but then came Bush, H.W., and they say he's a groper too. from a wheelchair. I mean, the press is having a field day. In that packet, you'll find 2 letters that I wrote to President Bush, George W. But we warned H.W. of what was in his mind toward the Muslim world. Did you know that after 9/11, Wesley Clark, a general, talked about seeing a memo 10 years earlier out of the Pentagon? I want you to listen carefully. They were going to take down 7 Muslim countries in 5 years, ending with a war on Iran. So the spring came, and you saw, like dominoes, members of the Muslim world falling. But when 9/11 took place, which we challenged the government's interpretation of 9/11. It's a false flag operation. You knew that the country was divided in the election of George W. Bush over Gore. So while he was walking down the avenue, what's the name of that avenue in Washington? Pennsylvania Avenue. Instead of people saying hail to the chief, they were saying hail to the thief. And the country was so divided that what it needed was some event that could pull a divided country together. So here comes 9/11. And they say Muslims did it. They had some pilots that had gone to Florida to take flight lessons. I don't think they passed off of a Piper Cub. I don't understand how they had gained enough knowledge to get into the cockpit and at over 500 miles an hour, drop that plane down and then into the tower. Do you know that there's a CIA man, I think his name is Crosby? That man said, when the American people believe in whatever we have said, and they believe it's true, we have won. You are a misused population. So when Mr. Trump talks about fake news, he knows what he's talking about. Now the press, you say you're the fourth estate. I would say you're in a hell of a state. Because you can't say what you really know to be the truth unless it passes the muster of those who are your bosses. Some of the press are assets of the CIA. Did you hear me? They have deceived the American people. So Donald J. Trump is busting up the institutions of a democratic country. My God.
Yes, sir.
Congress has 10% of the people with Congress. The media, the people don't trust the media. So every time he say fake news, if you study an article, 70 years of the CIA, the criminal arm of the U.S. government. These are criminals. They go into countries, kill presidents, overthrow governments, create civil war, and back away like they did nothing. They're crying about Russia's hacking into your little election when the American government has interceded in 81 countries to fix their elections and put into power those that would be in favor of American interests. But let me come to the end of this now. Tricky Dick and Slick Willie. We went from a small prison population, and the crime bill was directly against black people. White folk can afford to smoke or use powdered cocaine, but they fixed something in the crack cocaine. And we became addicted, and they sent us to prison. Once we're called a felon, they knew we couldn't vote anymore. So they were killing us at the voting booth by putting us in prison. And it all was a plot. And Mr. Trump, the consequences of America's evils over time has fallen in your lap. Do you know that we've been a problem for you ever since we've been here? You fought a civil war over what to do with us. Wow, think about that. Poor black brothers and sisters, you're so conscious now. You're pulling down the Confederate flag, you know, because that was the flag of the South in their breakaway rebellion against the North. But that's history.
Yes, sir.
You don't feel their pain, and they sure don't feel yours. But do you know how many white folk in the South lost their homes, lost their farms, lost their lives in that war? So when you force them to take down the flag that represents their commitment to slavery, yes, and to the way of the South, you jump up and pull it down, and you don't think you're going to get a backlash from white people? Robert E. Lee is a great general. When America won the war with Japan, they sat down with the generals. First World War, they showed respect, one general to another, one warrior to another. So now you want to take, okay, Robert, we don't like you, but get your statue out of here. So President Trump said, well, where's it going to end? Because the first 5 presidents were all slave owners. You're going to tear down the Jefferson Monument? You see how it's getting? So now white folk, as I said, when Mr. Trump was elected, the onion was being peeled back, and white civility was no more. They're not acting by you, like you think they should. They're angry. And they're killing us. And they know they have a genocidal plot against all black America, starting with Nixon and Kissinger. And Memorandum 200, go look it up. They want to cull the population of our planet by 2 billion people. This is not human. This is satanic. They've got their scientists in laboratories how to control your mind. So Dr. Wesley, our minister and analyst and researcher, he put out a book on weed. I mean, that's like talking to a pig eater and telling them don't eat pig. Man, they'll beat you up and sit down and eat a hog head. When you talk about weed to black people without God, you better put God in the equation, brother. Because weed is all right if it's pure. It has properties in it that can be used for medicinal purposes. But they're weaponizing the weed now. And they're doing lobotomies on the black man's brain. With chemistry, biology, and electrical energy stimulation. You're under assault, black brothers and sisters. Why is the sperm count in black men falling? Because of the food you eat and the water you drink. The lead in the water in Flint is not an accident. It's in Cleveland that way, and if you're not careful, it's here in Chicago. You can divert the water into the black community and then drop some stuff in the water. You drinking the water, you're bathing with the water, and all of a sudden you're acting strange. Do you know that homosexuality can be produced through chemistry? Don't be mad at me. Think. You can be turned into something through chemistry and the misuse of biology. So now the ball is in the court of Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump, you met with your Joint Chiefs of Staff in August and in early September. You had your generals at Camp David. They weren't talking about taxes. You don't use generals to talk about taxes. You were planning a war, sir. George W. Bush, after 9/11, said he was going to divide the Muslims against themselves. Now a 1,400-year dispute between Shia and Sunni is about to take into a war. President Trump went to Saudi Arabia and called 50 Sunni nations through the king of Saudi Arabia And instead of inviting Muslims to sit with Muslims to find out what's the point of contention and bringing peace about, he took those Sunni nations, yes you did, Mr. Trump, and you aimed their anger against Tehran and the Shia nation. Just recently, you sent much weaponry into the Middle East. You've sent missiles into the Middle East. You didn't send them. You urged them to buy them. A war is brewing. President Trump, you just left Asia, and you carried with you to Asia 3 of your largest aircraft carriers with F-18, F-16, a nuclear sub in the water. You had an armada around Kim Jong-un. You went to talk, but you had firepower to aid your lexicon of language. Barack Obama, you hate him. You call him a weak president because he's not like you, Mr. Trump, and he's not like his predecessors. He is like Jonah, who was a reluctant prophet. Barack Obama was reluctant to be the type of wicked man that your presidents are, have been, and like you said, let's take the oil. See, that's not presidential. The presidents would say, let's see if we can make a deal and give them money for their oil because we really want it all. That's presidential. We'll send our Secretary of State. He's such a diplomat. But you, Mr. Trump, we'll take the oil. You remember? And with Stephanopoulos on ABC, we'll bomb the hell out of them. See, Mr. Trump is real. He is what he is. Now you either got to see him as he is, because all the rest of them were vampires that looked good in the day, but when night came, you know. Mr. Trump, and I say this to my brother Barack, you really tried to make America better. Couldn't succeed. Because the moment you went overseas and started talking about the mistakes that America has made, Romney and the Republicans said, look at him. He's over there apologizing. Mr. Trump, more than an apology is needed. Mr. President, you're going to have to deal with either the thought that's in your mind that will destroy America and her future? Because once the trigger of war is pulled, it will escalate. Now, I'm going to tell you what my teacher told me. You have planned a war. The war that you have planned, you and your generals, is to the Middle East. You want to use the Sunni at the prodding of Israel to attack Iran. Just like you did with my brother Gaddafi. You laid back, leading from behind. You in Syria now. Boy, this is rough. And Mrs. Clinton, she encouraged you to give the go-ahead to kill Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi had come in out of the cold. Gaddafi gave up all his weapons of mass destruction. And Bush used to be so proud to say, Gaddafi got the message. He's come in. And then under Barack, Hillary Clinton imposed her will. And they murdered Muammar Gaddafi. And the killing of Muammar Gaddafi wrapped a ribbon around Kim Jong-un. And it was given to you as a gift. You will never get North Korea to give up what she has as a trump card. That's over, Mr. Trump. Can you live with North Korea with nuclear weapons? I think you're going to have to. Even though you have war plans already to knock out North Korea, but China said, if you attack North Korea, we have to defend them. China is right. Allah don't love aggressors. He said, but if North Korea attacks you, America, we'll lay out of it. So you went there thinking that you making friends. Wrong. You didn't discuss with China his plans for war. You have laid out in the Pentagon how you can wipe the Chinese out. But you don't want China, not yet. And you don't want Kim Jong-un yet. But you're looking for a softer target and you think that's Iran. Wrong. Wrong. If you permit Israel to push Saudi and the Sunnis into war with the Shiites, I want to say this to the Muslim world. See, you are so blinded that you think with America's backing you can win. Wrong. You're a Muslim. If you got the backing of Allah, you can win. But you don't have that backing. Not as an aggressor. Pakistan is sitting there with nuclear weapons. I noticed, Mr. Trump, he didn't mention Pakistan. Although at the United Nations, you did mention Iran. You mentioned Venezuela. You mentioned Cuba. And you mentioned Kim Jong-un. You'd rather fight all of those three and leave Kim Jong-un alone. But guess what? Guess what they found in North Korea? $6 to $10 trillion in mineral wealth. And guess what they found in Afghanistan? They dropped the mother of all bombs in an empty space, letting us know that you got it and you will use it. But what did you uncover? You know that in Afghanistan, there's another 10 trillion in mineral wealth. So Barack tried to get you out of there, but you agreed. You're back in it now. And you're not just in there. They found oil in the Golan Heights. Right. And Israel said she wants to get involved in the fray in Syria. But Russia is there. And they found tremendous oil reserves in the Golan Heights. And Israel wants to take that oil so that she will be oil self-sufficient. See, and just as you're reaching for it, your hands are going to get burned. And Israel, you are making America lose big time. You don't want me to say how much control AIPAC has over the U.S. government. And I know the press is here. You can't even say it except you tell something ugly so that your editors will give you leave. But brothers and sisters, let me tell you, you're going to be set free. Because that kind of cowardly news person who knows the truth and afraid to tell it, if you love this country, you tell the truth to change America, for she is going down and fast. Mr. President, you won't make America great again. Not in our time. She became great killing Native Americans. She became great enslaving us, bringing us from Africa into America to work the cotton fields. You're not going to get that opportunity back anymore. We made America rich and strong. And you can't tell me, Farrakhan, if you don't like America, you can go on back to Africa. Let me tell you something, white folk. You don't have a place on this earth that you can call your own except what we gave you, and that's in Europe. Now I'm closing. My God, Farrakhan. Are they planning war? Yes. Is it against black youth and black people? Yes, sir. Absolutely. I want to close with showing you the signs that I had to watch in order to know what to say to Mr. Trump today. I was right, and you'll see it in your pack with President Bush. I was right with Ronald Reagan. When we had the Million Man March in this city, do you know that you were looking at a miracle? Let me tell you something. I can't take credit for what I know God helped me to do. We had the support of the nationalist community. We had the support of the church. 82% of the people present were Christians. 12% were other. And a Muslim called it, with the help of a Christian pastor, the Reverend Dr. Ben Chavis. We could not have done it without the black press. BET under Bob Johnson took out a full-page ad in USA Today back in the Million Man March. Mayor Marion Barry gave us the greatest support we have ever had from any mayor. I can't even get a police escort in Washington, D.C. Suppose I'm assassinated here. But you're already planning to kill me, and that I know. To the government. You're not coming into the black community looking for black identity extremists and not looking for me. You're not coming looking for separatists and saying you're not looking for me and the Nation of Islam. Muslims, do you know that we're the only thing that stands in between their wicked plan of the demasculization of the black man? The only thing that stands between that is the Nation of Islam. Now, those of you who are in love with Jesus Christ, I want you to know that a black man from Georgia was raised from a dead state, Elijah Muhammad. And you tried to kill him. And you thought you had succeeded. That's why when I was taken up on the wheel, he said, make known to them their plans and tell them you got it from me, Elijah Muhammad, on the wheel. What was he asking me, pardon me, ordering me to tell you that for? So you would know that he escaped your plot to kill him. He's alive. He is in power. I want to introduce you to Jesus the Christ. That man is on the wheel with his teacher. He's been up there now for 42 years. He said that God studied 42 years to deliver us from the hands of our tormentors. He's ready now. Now listen, I'm not playing now. They don't want to give you up. But I'm saying this to you, President Trump. The ball is in your court now. Well, what do you have for me to do? I think you should repent for all the evil that America has done to us, to the peoples of the world. Like it was in Nineveh, the only city that ever was saved in the Bible from the judgment of God was because Jonah, a faithful prophet, warned them, and they had the heart to repent. And Nineveh lived for 300 more years. We're at the end of America as you know it. But if you let us go, you don't have nothing for us to do. But you have planned to continue the work of your predecessors, not Barack. Barack is out of it yet in it. Poor fella. He wanted to be Pharaoh. And he's not a good Pharaoh. I mean, the pot is not made for him. He tried out for it, and they gave him 8 years, you know, and look at the way they talked about him. We helped put him there. They called him a monkey. They mocked his wife and children. Mr. Trump darn near tore up the White House, getting every aspect of him out of there before he moved in. You hate our shadow. He was a good man, and you hamstrung him. He could have helped you, not to be great again, but to be better. Better than you are, and better for the world, because you taking the world down with you. Now, I have delivered a message and a warning, Mr. Trump, because I don't have an armada. I come to you. No army, no navy. These brothers that are around me, they don't carry any weapons. We're forbidden to carry weapons. We're forbidden to store weapons in our home. So if you want to kill us, we're here. I'm not running from you. I'm running to you. Because I had one more thing to do. And I earned me a first-class ticket to the wheel. And unfortunately, I had to learn what that one more thing was. I tried doing many things. I said, what is that one more thing? What is the one more thing that Jesus had to do before he could go to be with the Father? He had to go to Calvary and Golgotha and be crucified and die. I told you from Reverend Willie Wilson's church, I know the price that I gotta pay, not for lying, but for telling the truth. I've suffered all these years for telling the truth. My family has suffered all these years for being with a father and a husband that tells the truth. But I'm at the end of my journey among you. A temporary pause. And when you hear that I'm gone, I will get away. You're not going to kill me. He told me in a cryptic sentence, he said, brother, if Allah can't save me, that's a sign that he can't save you. I went to a funeral that was supposed to have been his. I saw a body that was supposed to have been his. I kissed the forehead of that body, and I believed that my teacher was dead. But if he was dead, all the things that he taught me wouldn't make any sense, because he gave me so much to do that I couldn't do it if he were not alive to guide me in the doing of it. So in 1981, I said, no, he's alive. I learned through study and through help from those who heard him say things that he never said to me, because he knew his servant. I would be dead now if I believed he was alive, because I would have fought like hell to keep the work that he had done alive. But he wanted it destroyed. Fulfilling the scripture, unless a seed of corn fall to the earth and die, it can't bring up a new stalk. I've been among you now 40 years, and I have not wavered one time. And they have not been able to make me bow down. Neither have you, my black brother and sister. I have fought for you. And I ask you for nothing. So, Mr. Trump has a decision to make. I don't go to White Houses. If his study of what I'm sending him in the mail, to let him see what the CIA is doing to black people, and what the government has been doing. If you wish to talk to me, I'll be glad. Because it's not about that kind of deal. It's about letting our people go. Because you know you have nothing for them to do. Well, what do you want? No. some of this earth that we can call our own. How much do you owe us? Have you ever added it up? In today's dollars, it's in trillions what you owe us. So just like you push the Palestinians out to give the Jews a homeland, and we're the real ones. Push some of your own people out. And we'll take 8 states. Oh, Farrakhan, now the wheels have gone off your wagon. Yeah, well, you didn't have none on yours. Let me tell you something. If you don't give justice to us, you will lose everything you got, including your life. Because God now said he's ready to fight you for our deliverance. And he told me to tell you, you don't have no fight against the forces of nature. I know you say it's global warming. No, brother and sister, there is global warming. It's true. And man and woman have done something to produce a warming. But what you seeing, that ain't global warming, baby. That's the judgment of God. And so I'm here to tell you that I come to you, but I got backup. I don't have no aircraft carrier. But he already told me what he's going to do with the 6th and 7th Fleet. You squeeze me a little, and I'll tell you a little more. You're going to be free. Free in the Caribbean, because he won't be able to exercise nothing on you. Did God move through the Caribbean? Because he don't want you down there sunning and thinking you're going to have a paradise. So you tear up your paradise. And you got to get up off of tourist dollars and go to school and learn that there's wealth right up under your foot. And we can take the whole Caribbean and make a nation out of it with wealth and power. And by the way, did you call the brothers that took a knee sons of bitches? That's not nice, President. You wouldn't want nobody to refer to your mom in that kind of way. And you're about to go to war. I know that the generals are a little PO'd at you. Because you know, like ancient Rome when she was going down, the real Roman didn't want to fight. They were having sex parties, licentious feasts. You know who was fighting for Rome? It was some of those that Rome had conquered. So the Mexicans and the Hispanic brothers and sisters, DACA. Hey, didn't you take Mexico from them? Texas was Mexico. Didn't you take Arizona? California? Yes. About 6 countries, states rather, you took. When they coming back. You call them aliens. They say, I'm just coming home. You wanted them. Cheap labor. You know, you don't want to pick any apples or grapes or vegetables. They pick. They're here. They're loyal. They're faithful. You have them in your army, in your navy. You got about 400,000 of us like that. Elijah Muhammad said, we shouldn't take part in wars which take the lives of human beings unless you give us the necessary territory where we'll have something to fight for. Our days of fighting for your madness is over. It's over. So the Christ told me to tell you, he's in power. And that God has turned over all power into the hand of that one you call the Son. I'm telling you who the Son is. You know the white fella that you got on the wall is not Jesus' Son or God's Son. We don't know your man is the Son. Well, stick around. You haven't got nothing from your white fella. Let me show you a black one that can give you salvation. How do you know he can give you salvation? I am your example. He made me. He opened my eyes, and now I'm opening yours. He opened my ears, and now I'm opening yours. He took the knot out of my tongue, and now I'm taking the knot out of yours. When I couldn't walk and needed a cane, he said, pick up your bed, black man, and walk, and we've been walking ever since. So don't tell me that Jesus is not present. He's present in me. He's present in you if you believe in him. So all you white people that love Jesus, come follow a black man. And if race is killing you, then you will die from the hand of the living Christ. Oh, yeah. In the Bible it said when that last trump is sounded. Trump. It said then the trumpet. That's your brother. And then we all will be changed from corruption into incorruptible. You can't buy us. We're incorruptible. And guess what? We've been changed from mortal into that which is immortal. Not that we can live forever, but what we're a part of will never, ever be removed from the earth. You can't say that about yourself, white folk. You come this way, there's absolution for you. You bow down and submit, there's absolution for you. You can't prove that. Well, I'm leaving now. And I tell you what, watch how the God will give a punctuation to what I said to you from him today. So if you keep going the way you're going, it's over. May Allah bless you all. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
This concludes our press conference. To the members of the press, if you have a question for Minister Louis Farrakhan, if you could write your question down and give it to our editor-in-chief of the Final Call newspaper, Brother Richard Muhammad. Those questions will be given to Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he will answer your questions promptly. Thank you.